All right, welcome back again. Now let us start Mark session here. Let's start with ZBrush and how it works. So this first session is about the user interface and the principles of ZBrush, and we will go from here. Okay, so when you open up, it doesn't matter which version. It will launch with a home page, so every news, something interesting appears on the horizon, it will show up. You can turn it off. But usually it's coming back after times. Now here's the homepage button, so anytime if you want to get back, you can open it up. And what you see here is kind of a welcome set. That means you have Lightbox open. Lightbox is basically an explorer, a collection of your content that is coming with ZBrush. So there's plenty of things that you can use right away. Now by default it's opening up the projects, and here we have this big button. Lightbox, it's showing up. If you don't see something updating here that you have saved, you need to refresh it. Now right away the first key, the hotkey, is the comma button to open this up and close it. It's quite handy, and you can turn it off by default, but usually it's pretty cool if you have this one, at least at the beginning for sure. So we will talk just a second the details about ZBrush, but before we do that, here's a little check. So depending on your screen resolution, you may see or not this expose view button. If you don't see it, you see rotation, polyframe, but you have a so small resolution for whatever reason, please check this. If you don't see it, go up here, preferences, go to interface UI, and check button size. So the default is 48. You may want to go with 44 or even smaller, so that is up to you. That little button, you need to restart ZBrush, and then the button will appear or not. If not, please fine tune it. This is the farthest button that you see. Another issue that's coming up, that the active points count, it's not appearing on my screen, and that is because replay last and other features came in here, so it's not visible. But if we click on the divider, we can see that polygon count much better, and there will be room to actually display the numbers. Okay, so let us start from the very beginning, and most of you are interested in 3D, but we will explore 2.5D, 2, and explain what ZBrush is for, what it was made originally, what was the design, and discuss that, because it's important if you experience some issues with during your learning experience. So here's the demo soldier, which was a good guy. We are replacing the existing scene that is actually empty, so I'm not really caring about this. No, don't want to save, and opening this up and pressing F to fit in the figure. You may see two color tones, and by default, if you are opening a project, you will see this matcap material gray, and the brighter area, that subtool, is the selected subtool. So what a subtool is, subtool and tools in general, it's a little bit confusing in ZBrush. These are basically your models and your parts or primitive objects. So it's a collection of various items you use as content. So go to subtool, and here if you open this up, we have a list. It's kind of a layer system that you have, not exactly working like layers, much more like an inventory, but it has some layering features, so it's a combination of an inventory and layer system. And here we have this actual selected model, name is Demo Soldier. If I'm clicking on the shirt, that will be highlighted in the brighter gray, and that is now highlighted as well here too. Now you may notice that, but it's to rotate something, if you just simply touch with your pen or holding the left mouse button, the tip of the pen is basically a left mouse button. When you are outside the model on the document area, you can rotate freely. When you are on the model, you're basically start sculpting, as you see. Let me press F and zoom in. It's really a low resolution stuff, and the brush size is fairly small, but we already starting sculpting. So that is about when you are outside. Now this is the old navigation. I will tell in just a second what's the new navigation. But if you like this, because it's convenient, you don't have to press anything. This is how you use it. When you're zoomed in so much, when you can't really avoid to hitting the frame, the figure, then you can use the save frame, and in the save frame this rotation still works even if the model is there. So it's sculpting here if the model is selected, but here it rotates. It sculpts here, but here it rotates in the save frame. Now what I just did is when you are holding down the Alt key, you can quickly select various sub-objects. Okay, so you don't have subtools. You don't have to go in here and select by name. However, you can do it. The other navigation, this is called new navigation, but it's new like probably about 10 years ago it was starting to be used. If you hold down the right mouse button, which one is, if you have a pen, a vacuum pen for example, with a tablet, you have 3 buttons. The tip is the first one, that's the left mouse button, and depending on your configuration and the vacuum settings, most of the vacuum tablets are configured that way that you have the bottom button of your pen at the side of the pen, and that bottom button is the right mouse button, and this is quite ergonomic and comfortable, so you can use that one. So when I'm hovering over and not touching the tablets and moving around, that is for rotation. And if you're just not moving around, just simply pressing the right click, it will bring you this dialog. Okay, so few settings are found here. Also, if you press the space bar, this will come up. Some people like it, some people don't. It's up to you, but certainly a few features are there. Yet again, if you press F, it will frame your selected subtool. You can rotate around. If you're holding Control, that is zooming in and out. And if you're holding Shift, that will snap in a viewport. Okay, so when I'm starting rotation and holding down Shift, it will snap. So rotate and hold Shift and it will snap to various views. Alt is for panning. So when you're holding Alt and using this one, it is for panning. Now, a few more things about the 3D navigation. If you press P, it will turn on and off this perspectivity function. So press P. That was pretty nice. So P. And the floor that you see here, that actually has a coordinate system. That is the hotkey for that is Shift P. And it will turn this on and off. Now, as you see, the coordinates are the following way. The left to right is X and red, just like in most of any software, 3D. It's quite a staple thing. The upside direction, however, it's the Z-axis, that's usually green. I'm sorry, the Y-axis, and the Z-axis is exactly facing towards you, and this is why it's called ZBrush, because it's the Z depth that we are painting. But just a second and we will talk about the 2.5D part. Okay, so this is a 3D view, and we will talk about a user interface just in a second. And these are the basic navigations. One side note that can help your navigation, because it is confusing a little bit at the beginning. This figure is just tilting a lot when you start making these navigation practices. So to make it easier, you can use the head here and snap into a view. And once you have a solid front view, for example, you can go in here and turn on Y, and then it will be not tilting. Okay, so this is a good feature to have. The other thing is the framing function. F is here, move is here. This is the right mouse or button and Alt key. And we have the zoom is for control. It's the same zoom here. And we have the rotate. That's actually the easiest thing. So you can do it with almost anyways. Alright, so rotate. These are the basic navigations for 3D. Now hold on, because we have other type of navigations, and those navigation points are belonging to a 2.5D set. Okay, so what 2.5D is, let me just clear this and go to preferences and initialize ZBrush. Okay, so in ZBrush, no, we don't want to save. Yes, we want to initialize it. And look at what's going on here. And now hold on for a second. So what you see here is, this is called a document. All right, this is like an empty canvas that you have. And if I'm just placing my pen, I'm using these strokes, and the pattern that you see here, it's kind of a square. And if I'm moving and laying multiple layers on this, you'll see that this is actually building up. This is the Z-axis. It's like embossing. It's like designing a coin, a relief. So this is a convenient technique for illustration and creating some nicely looking detailed images. However, it's not exactly 3D. So what's going on here? Right away, we are using a brush. And that brush, however, this is called tool palette, but that brush is laying here. And this is a little bit confusing sometimes. So these brushes, these are the 2.5D brushes. The classic simple brush. And we have hook brushes, alpha, painting, etc., etc. And we have a set of 3D meshes as well. So these 3D meshes are kind of primitive objects that we can start from. And everything is, you can find here. Again, these are kind of content related stuffs. And this is an old system, but it's still there because you can still use them for some fine tuning. Okay, so there we are. And this is the brush that's working. This is the stroke type that you see here, these individual strokes. And alpha is, it's turned off. There's no alpha. However, the brush still has a rectangular pattern. And the reason is the unique nature of ZBrush, that the user interface is actually a kind of tricky thing. Where you see black in ZBrush in general, black color means transparent. It's a full black color. Okay, so they made it fairly easy to use JPEGs instead of using alphas, TIFFs, heavier file size things. Fairly low size images with a clean, nice black background can work pretty well with alphas. But if we click on here and changing an alpha, let me click something that's a little bit more gradient. Now this whole thing looks different. Okay, so what I'm doing here, so let me just draw it. And in ZBrush, the invert function, so that turns the whole thing, instead of pulling out, it's pushing back. If you're using the Alt key, and when I'm using this and pushing this back, it looks like we have a kind of a surface, and that surface, if we are drawing, everything's coming out from that surface. If we are using the Alt key, everything is pushed behind that surface. It's like a virtual curtain or something, or a kind of a water surface. Imagine that these are mountains emerging from the water, but when some of the mountains are eroded, those are pushed back behind these surfaces. Okay, so we have a combination. We have a brush, we have a type of stroke, we have an alpha pattern that helps the brush to work, and we can also add a texture. So something that's pretty easy to recognize right away. This is the star shape. So as you see, it is maintained and appearing all over. Now what else? We can actually use different materials. Now some of the materials are very strong. So if I'm using a gold material, it's not exactly, let me turn off the texture because they're interfering. Oh yeah, so now this gold material, for example, is much more visible. So what I'm doing now, using a custom using a brush, using a specific stroke with an alpha pattern, and painting with a material. What I can do as well, I can use a simple material like something that's, for example, shiny, where you have a toy plastic. Toy plastic is a nice and shiny material. Can you see it here? It's often used for eyes. We can also change colors, and texture is off, and the material is basically not giving any color, so it's not like gold or not like this red wax. And now, when I'm starting using this material with the particle color, we have a color tone appearing. Alright, and this was just a simple brush. Of course, if you wish, you can go crazy and use other brushes. Let me just show you a fiber brush, which was a really nice one, a lovely fiber brush. But how can we make it to 3D? And what was the intention here? So the benefit of this technique is it's incredibly detailed, so you can really give as many strokes as you wish. If they can appear on the pixels, the pixel will show the change. It will show. Now, how do we know the resolution of the image? How do we know how many details we can present here? This is why we have these 2D document related controls. So we can scroll it, move it around. Of course, we can zoom it in and out. You can see this is our little patch of work area. If you hit actual, it will snap back and show the original size. And AA half is a kind of a neat anti-aliased version of our stuff. Don't confuse it. This is the 3D navigation, and this is for the document. Documents, when we are using documents, for example, we are using documents when we are rendering something. And if you're rendering something that's a higher resolution, that means you have to set up your document size higher. So going in here, document, changing these sizes, and then render your image. Go to AA half or zoom it out, and then document and export, and then you have a nice image to export. Let me just quickly show this document and export, and there we are. Maybe we can change it to Astop and ZBrush documents, and that's it, basically how to save it. Let me just overwrite this one, ZBrush document, and we still have a couple of cropping options if we wish. You can actually drag this and set it manually and just press OK, and then you have this image saved. Okay, so let me hit cancel. So what else? When we turn to the 3D part, is here's a blend. Here's the 2.5D in action. So this is how it works. I want to create a polymesh star, and when I'm starting anywhere, I can drag it out, and this function is pretty important. So automatically, when these objects are called, ZBrush remembers that the creation method of these, it requires a different type of stroke. This is the drag type of stroke, drag rect. And depending on where your cursor is placed at, it will place and start and pull the 3D mesh at that location. And it could be a full figure, okay? It could be quite detailed, so we can create millions of these, all right, easily, okay? So it could be a quite interesting fractal looking like illustration. But how to make it 3D? So when you have the last object created, so I'm just recently drawing out this object, and I start using move, for example. I can start moving it around, scaling it according to the needs, depending on the axis, and yeah, but also rotate. Okay, so W is for moving, E is for scale, and R is for rotation. It is a 3D object, but we're just not really sculpting on this yet. Now, if you want to actually sculpt on something, let me go back to draw mode. The hotkey for that is Q, draw mode. And instead of having this gear, here's the sphere. Let me draw this out. And when you press T, it will enter to edit mode. And now this is a 3D object, so I'm using the right click, Alt for panning, Control for zooming, and if I want to snap it into a view, I'm using the Shift key, so rotating and Shift. Now, what happened with this 2.5D canvas? What happened with this background? It is still there, it's still active, but we don't use it anymore. So to get rid of it, if you press Ctrl N, now it's gone, and you see these this perspective floor in here, and we can start sculpting actually on this model. If sculpting is not allowed, we may want to make it a polymesh, and then it will allow us to sculpt, which one is great. Okay, so whenever you are starting from a new thing and you see nothing basically, but you want to create a 3D model, you can go to ZBrush, sphere, drag it out, press T and start over. If you have a different model, it will remember that model and you can restart over. And if you press the T again, it will ask, what do you want to do? Do you want to switch to 2.5D? Yeah, I want to switch. So I want to create another set of spheres. Then I want to go back, for example, to 3D and edit that last one. I've used just F to fit it in. And here we have this original on a 2.5D canvas. In the 3D part, we have this 3D model that's free to edit. And when I try to edit it, I still receive a message that I haven't converted this yet to a polymesh model. We will discuss it later on what's the difference, because it's kind of a primitive object with initial state. But right now what you have to remember, that's if you want to work on these models, just make it a polymesh and then you're good to go and you can start over. All right. Please check what's going on with the background. When you're opening up from Lightbox, for example, you're opening up this demo soldier project. The background looks different. If you installed just now the software, the background may look smaller, or other things may come in. So how to set it up once you have installed the software and the button size is okay and you know already your navigation, now you just want to start working and make sure everything fits. So in the document area, there is something called new document. Now it's basically, this is the button what we want to use, but one thing that you need to know, that V size, W size, it's a resize, it's checking the window size, and when it is pressed, and it is pressed by default, and you hit new document, it will recalculate the available space. Now I want to save it and fulfill and make sure that you have a nice working area. What else we can adjust? Here's this range value. Range value means 0.5 is the placement of the middle tone of the gradient. I don't really like the gradient, so my suggestion, it's a little bit better if you don't see that harsh black, because it's not that good for the shadows. So document, remove that range value, and if you want to start every time with this type of document, then usually that's ideal. Go to document and save it as a startup document. Okay, so now it's saved and we can start our project. Here's something that a lot of people ignore, but ZBrush has these messages. Take your time, read these messages, because this is a very valuable information. And you don't have to read it all the time, because once you're familiar, then you're good and you can move forward. But at the first couple of times, these are actually really can save you a lot of headache if you just take the time and read them, because otherwise you can't move over in some cases. Okay, so let me click in here, and we have this autosave progress. And here's the message. time to time, autosave will kick in. And before we're moving on further things, let me tell you that autosave is by default. You can hit this quick save button or number 9 to autosave a project. Your autosave files, you can find them in the lightbox in the quick save areas. So we have some quick saves from a previous session. And here's something that you need to know, especially if you don't have too much available space. When you start learning the software and you're using these projects and demos and other things, it can grow really large. And quick saves are just created and more quick saves are created until you reach a huge number. So how to change it, how to get rid of unwanted quick save files? Let me open up the divider, close this brush palette, and use the preferences and dock preferences to here. So here's this pin, and when you click on something, you can drag this pin and you can transform this palette. You cannot really delete this palette because it's really always here, and whenever you have this one, only one instance is the real, so it will disappear whenever you open this up. Alright, now enough is enough interface, and what we're looking for is quick save. And here we have maximum quick save files 100, and you can delete quick save files. Yes, we'll delete it, and it will not update automatically, so you have to close and reopen. And now there's no quick save files. Alright, so that is it. We have adjusted the user interface a little bit in size. We have learned the navigations, and now you know a few things about 2.5D and how to clear the canvas if you have something. And it's time to go a little bit deeper. How about the brush settings? So let me just open up the demo sorter file. So tool, projects, and demo sorter file, double click, and just open this up, yeah. And here we are. So the demo sorter, what to do with it? First of all, subtools. Now here is something that's a little bit unique to ZBrush. Unique is that means the whole user interface is designed to be used with a pen tablet. The other thing is, it's not. A lot of people say it's not user friendly. I feel quite the contrary. It's not learning friendly from the beginning. You can learn it pretty cool and pretty fast if you have some help, or if you have an understanding how and why things are working a certain way. And once you have an understanding, you will experience, okay, this is working nice. The buttons are there. You can customize everything if you wish. But it's not like, there's so many features, there's so many functions, so many different workflows that's representing different industries. So from jewelry to game design to forensics, dentistry, whatever, scientific illustrations. This is animation. These are very different industries. There's no such software that can handle all. So this is why it's a very flexible software, but it's not that simple out of the box. So one thing that comes to mind in practice is when you're having selected a object, a tool, if you press Shift F, that will show and hide polyframe. And polyframes are basically a two-way thing. It shows the wires, and it shows a material ID type color, polygon colors. These are called polygroups in ZBrush, and these are really powerful things. Without these, it's really hard to do all the fancy stuff in ZBrush. Okay, but what is interesting, and the reason I was talking about the pen tablets, because we have some very tiny buttons within the buttons. So here we are. Let me just use Shift M, and this is the magnifier. So here's a button called line, and if I'm turning this off, the wireframe is not visible. And here's the fill, and that is regarding the color. Okay, so some people, including me, will like to use it without the wireframes. Wireframes are handy, but it's depending on the type of work. Okay, so let me turn this off, and now we have this feature. And the reason I'm showing this to you, because at the beginning it's much easier if you see these. So Shift F, it helps a lot to understand what's going on at the moment. Alright, so that is about the subtools. Of course, if you wish, you can rename a subtool. So here we have the list, and you can hit on rename and just name it to soldier. Alright, and we have shirt, vest, etc., etc. Now, how to start working on and sculpting on the body, for example. We have the standard brush, and we want to sculpt on the body. Here we are. Shift F. I will turn off now the polyframe, and zooming in and see that the resolution is not that high. What to do? First of all, let me hide away everything and isolate the model I'm working on. Here's this button. This is called solo. This is the solo mode. So now everything is temporarily hidden, and now only the mesh, the body mesh, is visible, so I can comfortably work on this guy. But because the resolution is so low, even if I'm start making a stroke, there's not much going on. This is great if you are making big changes, but if you want to go for details and testing out brush behavior, it's not good enough. So what to do? We can use Control D to subdivide a surface. So technically what it does, when you have a polygon, it splits up that polygon 4 times. Now when you press Control D, it was splitting up the polygons and show the result, and you can work on the result. If you press Control D again, it was splitting up the polygons, show the result, show the actual level of polygon numbers, this 520,000, and you can start working on this. It's still not super smooth, so if I'm pressing Control D again, now it's 2 million polygons for the entire body. It's not crazy high, but it is decent to start creating things. Okay, so now when I'm making a stroke, it's quite nice, and there are plenty of soft transitions with this brush. How to move between resolution levels. So for example, one day you want to go with the details, the other day or the other part of the hour you want to go with broad details and changes. So Shift D is your friend to walk down in resolution, and D is just to go up with the existing resolution. Please make a note. Let me show this in action because we have geometry. This is the number of subdivision levels. So when I'm pressing Shift D, it walks down to the 5th level, and Shift D again 4 and 3 and 2 and 1. And when I'm pressing D, it will walk up until it reaches the highest level that I have created. And if I want one more layer, one more level of details, I can press Ctrl D again, and it will change this 4 times. So that will be a quite high number, and we don't necessarily need that. Okay, so this one is enough. Now let us talk about the brush. This is the standard brush. If you press S for 90% of the brushes, it will change the size of the brush. So let me do that. And as you see, symmetry is turned on. We have 2 contact points representing that we are using a symmetrical left to right brush. This is the X symmetry by default, and if you press X, it will show this. Alright, turning on and off. If you have a model, start symmetrically and work in symmetry as much as you can do. And then if you want to break up the symmetry, then turn off the symmetry and start working that way. Here's the thing. When you are zooming in super duper, you don't see the other interaction point with your brush. So for this reason, when you press X, this double edge is appearing. You can see how when I'm pressing this, the edge outer rim becomes a double rim. Okay, that is the hint that you have symmetry turned on. It's really useful because some cases you lose yourself in the details and you're just working, and okay, you're just working on one side but missing some parts. So we can mirror things, but not everything is that easy to be mirrored. Alright, so that is brush size. What else? The intensity of a brush is defined by this Z intensity value, and the hotkey for that is U. So when you have this U button, let me turn back on symmetry and undo this. And now I'm dividing a lot. Okay, so 8 million. So when you have this intensity slider turned on, this pole will be much more defined. Okay, so if we want to build up something here and turn him into a cyborg or robot or whatever, then we can start using these stronger features. Okay, so that is about the intensity. If you remember, in the 2.5D mode, we have already used the Alt key. When you press Alt key, it will push in the surface. And something else is turned on with the standard brush, and that is the L lazy mouse function. And now I'm turning this lazy mouse function off. My brush strokes are not so stable anymore. But when L lazy mouse function is on, you can see this jagginess. This was a little bit smoother, right? So and that's coming from the lazy mouse. But we have lazy mouse settings later on. We can discuss this. All right. So there we are. Alt is inverting the function. Now here's focus shift. When focus shift is high, the brush will be pointy. It's not brush size. It means instead of the whole circle of the brush, instead of that, only the center part is active. When you have a broader focus shift minus, that means way more area of the brush is active. This is not that interesting, but when we are having an alpha, and we have this alpha, and for example, we're changing to drag rectangle, and I'm pulling now out, we have this star created, and when we have the focus shift a little bit different, then the star is not really appearing, okay, because only the center of this area is active, right? You can see how soft it is, because the outer areas are not that much active because of the focus shift. And when the focus shift is lowered or even, then this will become sharper and sharper on the outside. You can see it's sharper and sharper, and of course we have the final ones. That is focus shift basically. And what I just did, and I've changed the standard dots mode. So instead of drawing with these stars, I have used the drag rect before. Okay, so that is about intensity, size, and focus shift. Alright, so we can use the Alt key and make the stroke negative. We can just use the stroke, change intensity, change size, and change focus shift with the O hotkey. If you would like to use this quick method, you can use the space bar. It's not exactly quicker in my experience because you have to open this up and look for the exact slider that you want to adjust. So it's not that convenient, but for example, it's really good for changing colors. but for these sizes it's better if you're just using the S. You don't have to hold it, just press S once and it will pop up at your cursor, and U, the same thing, and O to change these things up. Alright, that's it for the introduction. One last thing that is about the file formats and file savings. You have seen 2.5D version, you have seen a project version where we have everything is set and we just load a file and symmetry is on and the material is different and we don't have to adjust too many things, just start away and write sculpting. And we also have the tools, again the content type of files. So how to save all these three different types. When you want to save the image as a pixelated version, you can go to document and export, or if you save it for yourself in ZBrush format, that's 2.5D. Okay, it's 2.5D content. It's not exactly 3D, so you won't be able to rotate. You just have something that you can paint on, and let me just drop this. Okay, so let me leave edit mode. Yes, I want to switch, and if I want to create, I can pull out now these figures. Okay, so 2.5D. And the last one, if I'm pressing T, I can edit the last one. Okay, so this is how it goes. By the way, this technique is used to create multiple versions and then just start sculpting away. Okay, so to save this, if you save document, that will save only the 2.5D. If you want to save the entire project with all the settings, then you have to go to File menu and save as, and then it will save a ZBR file. P is the most important here. P is for project. When you're saving a file from here, document, it will save for document, save as, save the document, it will save a ZBR file. That's B like Balthazar. Okay, P for Peter, project. That is the file format that you 90% need at the beginning of your journey of learning ZBrush. The third version, that's not saving every setting, not saving the canvas, not saving the undo history of the object, because we have a long undo history. Let me just show this to you. We have some high resolution and there's a screen recording as well, so this is why the undo history is not as fluent as it should be, so it's calculating. Okay, so that is remembered as well, and when you're saving a project, that is included. Okay, so these changes are included. But if you want to save just the tool, just the 3D model as a content that you want to call in and work in another project, you can use a tool. So save as a tool, and it's like a simple ZTL file. Okay, so to save it as a Z tool, we just have a folder somewhere, and now the tool itself is saved. Okay, so there we are. Again, picture is document, the whole project is file, and this is what we use mostly. And later on, once you have an inventory of various models and multiple parts of the project, to save without the extensive undo history, you can use the tool save. So save as tool, and of course you can export here the tool itself or import different file formats, but we will go on this and explain more in the future. Alright, thank you very much. So these are the very fundamentals of using ZBrush and have an idea about the user interface. So see you next time. Goodbye.